Noctua rocked the boat with the NH-D15G2, but unfortunately not because of its high performance. Most users, including reviewers, were surprised by its sky-high price. Noctua claims that the eye-watering price is due to the long development time, which lasted for 10 years, the expensive materials and the support it provides. This makes me wonder if it is possible to have a cooler like the Thermalright Peerless Assasin 140 Black, which also uses a dual tower design, sold at $37 to $40 and still have a profit. It is less than 1/3 of the G2's price, so if its performance is decent, it will easily be the performance per price king. I have already evaluated another budget cooler, the Mugen 6, which follows a single tower design and is more expensive than the Thermalright Assassin since it costs $55. Still, both of these coolers are way more affordable than the D15 G2. In other words, in today's review, I will finally show you a Thermalright product against all I have evaluated so far. I was tired of reading comments about Thermalright's products after every cooler evaluation I did, so it is time to give you what you wanted. The review of the most affordable dual tower cooler available in today's market. The box looks cheap, but what matters most is that it offers good protection to the product. It's amazing that for $40 you also get a color box in addition to the product. The bundle includes Intel bracket, AMD bracket, Intel backplate, 2 fans, 4 fan clips, mounting hardware, thermal grease tube and a PWM splitter, among others. The cooler's base is large enough to cover the head spreader of the normal processors, but it cannot meet the demands of server CPUs with huge head spreaders. Moreover, make sure to peel off the plastic label before you install the cooler, otherwise you will put the CPU's over temperature protection to the test. Some close photos of the cooler showing the top shroud and the 6 heat pipes. I know I ask a lot from a $40 cooler, but it would be great if these were Torx screws instead of Phillips ones. The pair of fans is of good quality, especially considering the cooler's price. I have evaluated the 120mm fan and you can check its results in the Cybernetics fan database. The installation is easy as long as you follow the instructions. Typically the installation on the Intel LGA 1700 socket is more complicated than the AM5 socket because you have to keep in place the backplate while you do the screws. Another thing I noticed is the restricted feedback from the spring-loaded screws on the cooler's base, but you should not be afraid to tighten them all the way. Moreover, you have to remove the center fan to have access to these screws. Don't expect to find the long Phillips screwdriver in the bundle given the product's low price. Finally, it will be ideal if these screws were of Torx type. The cooler is not noisy. The higher the RPM in this chart, the better. %, fan speed, peak frequency excluding 50 and 63 Hz noise is 100 Hz. 50% fan speed, peak frequency 500 Hz. 70% fan speed, peak frequency 500 Hz. 100% fan speed, peak frequency 315 Hz. Here are the signal recordings. Normalized noise tests, Intel results. The temperatures are on par with those of other high-end coolers, but to get the complete picture, we have to look at the CPU frequencies as well. The CPU frequencies are in the low positions of the graphs, with other high-end but more expensive air coolers achieving notably higher speeds, from 60 MHz up to 105 MHz at 20 dB normalized noise output. CPU power consumption is among the lowest, which in this particular case isn't good, since it means that the CPU lowers its speed and voltage to keep the operating temperatures in control. AMD results. The CPU temperatures are high because AMD CPUs by design operate at high temperatures under high loads, adjusting their frequency accordingly to reach the desired TDP. This is why the temperature results alone don't mean much in AMD processors, and to have the complete picture, we also have to look at the average frequency and power consumption. CPU frequencies are high enough, the Noctua G2 gets a significant lead only at full fan speed, but this cooler is also 4 dB noisier than the Thermalright one. CPU's power consumption is high for air cooler standards. Overall performance. To calculate each cooler's overall performance, I take into account 3 factors: the CPU's temperature, wattage and frequency, by using this equation. Each chart shows the cooler under test as 100% and every other product's performance as relative to it. The overall performance in the Intel system might not look good with a first glimpse at the results, but look how close it is to the standard D15 G2 without the washer mode. The difference is lower than 2%. Moreover, the Thermalright cooler performs almost identically to the Deepcool Assasin models at 20 and 25 dB. At 30 dB, the Mugen 6 Black has a notable lead, and so does the way more expensive D15 G2. At full fan speed, the performance differences are more significant, mainly because the Thermalright cooler is among the less noisy ones at full fan speed. Performance per price. Intel, with a $37 to $40 price tag, depending on the store and the period, this cooler is a steal. The Scythe Mugen 6 follows with a large distance. Overall performance, AMD. Although it loses in the Intel platform, the Thermalright cooler takes the lead by a notable margin in the AMD system from the Mugen 6. The cooler's performance is way better in the AMD system, beating even the D15 G2 at 25 and 30 dB, with Noctua's cooler using offset mounting, which helps it achieve better performance in AMD systems. Only the D15 G2 LBC achieves higher performance in all noise levels from the Thermalright cooler, but should I remind you of its $150 price tag? Performance per price, AMD. The performance per price ratio is sky high. I constantly heard of the extra high performance per price ratios that the Thermalright coolers achieve, but I had to evaluate one to see it with my own eyes and equipment. However, the performance in the high power consumption Intel test system is not that impressive, with a Noctua D15 Chromax Black achieving differences from 7 to 10%. I don't mention the even higher performance of the super expensive Noctua D15 G2 with the washer mode, because I suspect that the Thermalright cooler's performance would also get a notable boost with the washer mode. So I chose to mention here the Chromax Black, which I evaluated on the standard socket. The performance of the lower wattage AMD test system is a revelation, with a highly affordable Thermalright cooler putting the Noctua G2 cooler to shame. And the latter used offset mounting, which allows for higher performance. Only the G2 LBC manages to achieve better performance in the normalized noise test, but it is up to you to decide whether a whopping $110 price difference is worth a 4% performance increase at 20 dB, 1.5% at 25 dB, and below 1% at 30 dB. I don't know how Thermalright managed to offer this product at such a low price, but I can safely say that it puts way more expensive coolers to shame, thanks to its crazy high price per performance ratio at both sockets I tried. Given my results, the Thermalright Peerless Assasin 140 performs best in AMD systems where the power consumption doesn't go through the roof. You should also consider its low noise output even with both of its fans spinning at full speed. At $40, this cooler is a steal, especially if you plan on using it on an AMD system. I suggest you do the washer mode on high power consumption Intel CPUs, which looks to work well while being inexpensive. Kudos to Thermalright for offering such high performance products at bottom low prices, proving that there is no need for crazy high prices or excessive research to achieve good performance. The moment other brands try to convince us to buy their products, throwing the extended research they did to make them as the first argument, Thermalright comes with a $40 cooler, showing that it is not rocket science to build a good and highly affordable cooler. Another thing I should mention here is that Cybernetics evaluated this cooler's 120mm fan and it achieved an impressive titanium rating at airflow. However, its static pressure is not that good at the bronze level, so I can't help but wonder how this cooler would perform with a platinum level static pressure fan. That's all guys, bye bye.